My name is Dawn Gray. I'm a physical therapist, inpatient physical therapist here at Valley Medical Center. I've been an employee here for almost 6.5 years. I am also one of the co-chairs of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And I am here today in the middle of Women's History Month to sit down virtually with Jeannine Erickson Grinnell, the CEO of Valley Medical Center. So before making history as the first female CEO to take on the helm of this organization, you've had a long history at Valley, Jeannine. I have notes, so if I allow me just a moment to go through my notes, that you signed on as the Director of Finance here at Valley in 2000. You've also held positions as Treasurer, Vice President of Finance, stepping up to Chief Financial Officer in 2016. And in January of 2021, you became the interim CEO of Valley Medical Center. And last but not least, CEO and Superintendent of Public Hospital District Number 1 of King County. So I'm not sure, I'm sure I'm not the first to say this since you have been in this position since September of 2021 last year, but let me personally welcome you and say congratulations on this role, Jeannine.
Well, thank you, Dawn. Yeah, thank you.
So we have a few questions for you here today. So the first question is, so serving in the role as Valley's first female CEO is quite a significant milestone. And what 3 words would you use to describe what this experience means to you?
Well, first, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you and to anyone who might be listening to this. I would say that being the first female CEO and also the first different CEO in 37 years, because I assumed this role from Rich Rudman, who preceded me and who hired me 20 years ago. It's pretty amazing to be both of those things, to be the first female and the first different person in 37 years. And when I think about that and I think about what that means, first and foremost, it's humbling. It's very humbling. And why it's humbling is to recognize that an organization and a community are entrusting, in this case, me, this person, to be the CEO, to lead an organization, a very dynamic organization in a very turbulent time. Healthcare right now is, it's turbulent on its own. Throw in a pandemic and a variety of other things that are happening in the world, and recognizing that you are entrusted with that is very humbling. And with that comes responsibility. There's honor there, but there's also a lot of responsibility in recognizing what you have been entrusted with and how to help move that forward in the right ways into the future to benefit employees, employee families, patients, and the broader community. I think the other words, so I would use humbled and I would use honored. I think I would also say that this experience is one that is both reflective, because I think you have to be really thoughtful when you are given an opportunity like this to make sure that what we do, because our culture is pretty amazing. It's vibrant. It has a tapestry all to its own, and recognizing and respecting that tapestry, you need to show and demonstrate, I think, thoughtfulness and being reflective in how you move forward, recognizing we have to move into a new generation. We have to move forward because the world isn't standing still. And finally, I would say my other word is undaunted. It's a phrase. I'm cheating. Undaunted optimism. I wake up every morning and I have my entire life. And I think it's a new day. And we have to embrace that new day, regardless of how something was before. And right now, I think having any optimism, a glimmer of a little candle flicker in everything that we are all experiencing and everything that everyone has struggled through over the last couple of years during a pandemic, and recognizing how to move all that forward. You need a little bit of undaunted optimism every day, because you kind of have to figure out how to do that. So that's what, and that is all entrusted by the organization and the community into whoever the CEO is. So it's humbling.
Thank you. It's a very, very thoughtful response, and humbling, honored, and undaunted optimism.
Yeah.
So speaking of optimism, undaunted or not, how would you describe your path to success given the gaps in healthcare, especially in leadership positions?
Very nonlinear. My path has been very nonlinear, and it's been a curved uphill climb with hairpin turns and some switchbacks, and there's been a couple rolling hills thrown in there as well. I started my career actually in publishing, and I thought I was going to be an amazing editor. I wasn't going to be the case, and I went back to school, and I picked up my accounting degree in addition to my other business degree, and I ended up doing an internship at the Washington State Auditor's Office, and that changed my life. I met two of my mentors there, Paul Lovelace and Karen Strami, who are both incredible people. And as part of that, I ended up auditing hospitals and healthcare organizations. And one of those was Valley Medical Center. I also audited Harborview, UWMC, Evergreen, a whole variety. And I became the manager over all of the hospital audits. And one year, Valley had a particularly bad audit. We had a lot of issues. And this guy named Rich Rudman said to me, hey, how would you like to come over to the other side? And we have a position open, and you can kind of fix all of these things that you are identifying. I said, no. I would turn him down 3 more times.
Oh, wow.
Over the next several years. And he kept at me, and he kept saying, you know, I really think, Jeannine, it would be great if you came over here and you worked for Valley. And at some point I recognized, you know, maybe that's meant to be. Maybe I'm supposed to do that because this opportunity keeps coming up.
Mhm.
And so I took it, and that's when I became the director of finance about 20 years ago now.
Okay.
I would say that, so that's a very nonlinear kind of pathway into healthcare. I would also say on that journey, I've been pretty historically one of the only females in most of those leadership roles along the way. And so the gender gap definitely exists. I have been, for whatever reason, fortunate to be one of those that kind of tends to be breaking the glass ceilings as we go. And I think with that also comes a lot of responsibility in recognizing what that is. But the journey itself has been nonlinear, it's been very curvy, and it has not been anywhere near either consistently sort of linearly straight or not, or on a straight upward trajectory. It's had a ton of curves and dips and valleys along the way.
I can definitely appreciate that you recognize the path that it's not been linear, that and I think that actually is a really important component in being optimistic, is realizing, you know, there's this saying, you don't realize how happy you are until you've had sad moments. So, you know, when you see the path that you've taken, you can look back and say, this is the accomplishment that I've made. And it's actually a strategy as a physical therapist that I use with people when they say, I'm not home yet. And I say, yes, but you know, today you stood up and took 5 steps when yesterday you couldn't stand at all. So I think that that's, you know, a admirable ability to be able to recognize that. What would you like to share, if anything, about your personal and professional journey as a leader? So I guess the secondary question would be, how have you developed confidence and resilience over the course of your twisty, turny, hairpin turny, non-linear, curvy journey?
Yeah, I would say that the journey has not been easy, and there have been many challenges along the way. And I think that what I would share is recognize that that's probably, everybody's going to have a path somewhat similar. They're all going to be very different. And each path that you have is going to have a gift and a challenge in it. And you have to be able to figure out how to recognize what each of those are. There were so many times in my career where I was told, you aren't going to be the one. It's not going to be you. Don't go for the position. Don't do this. And I had to sit back and think about, All right, do I believe that? Or do I listen to that? Is that from a source that's credible, that's giving me information that's really something I should be paying attention to, and there's a reason why? Or is it something else? And so one of my recommendations, I guess, and how I've developed confidence and resiliency is understanding how to recognize that, to recognize what the gift is, to recognize what the challenge is, to recognize that you should never stop trusting your inner voice, because your inner voice is probably going to be helping. We have, I think, naturally a predisposition to not always want to listen to that inner voice, to either disregard it or embrace it completely. And what I would suggest is that we listen to it cautiously, because it's probably giving good information. And I also think you, along the way, you should, and how I've developed resiliency and confidence is listening to that voice, recognizing I know what I know, and I'm going to believe my truth. But I'm not going to disregard, and this is something I would tell myself of 20 and 30 years ago. Make sure you are listening to those people who are your trusted others. Don't listen to everybody, because there's a lot of people that you should not. But listen to those trusted others, because they might be telling you something that you really should be listening to and has wisdom attached to it that helps you with your resiliency and your confidence. And finally, I think it takes a lot of time. I think these journeys take a lot of time. And I wouldn't answer this question this way 20 years ago, but I'll answer it this way now. There's just a lot that you learn along the journey, but figuring out what your gift is, because there is one there, even when you believe there's not. But you might have a challenge you have to address too. Figure out what those each are and then move ahead.
And I think something that you said a few times there in your response, I think is very important for all women. And in fact, the name of the book escapes me, but it was the subject of the book is about women listening to their intuitions and or their intuition. If we have more than one, then that's fantastic, I guess. But listening to your intuition and maybe more so in personal situations, but definitely I can see where it applies here in business. And I definitely have been on the side of being told that I wasn't the right person or the right fit or the right anything for something that I wanted. And being analytical and sitting down and not having, yes, we have room to have an emotional response, but also taking time, like you said, to step back and say, why are they telling me this? Is it, what is it that I feel? So I think that that's a really important piece of advice, personally, professionally, for any woman in any field and human beings in general, but definitely as we are, like I said, in the middle of Women's History Month, a good piece of advice for women. And speaking of women, how have female mentors in leadership positions or other women inspired you?
Well, from another women perspective, what I would say is that my mom has been a huge inspiration to me over the years. So I wanted to make sure I recognize that. From a leadership role, I already previously mentioned, I've had 3 mentors in my life, and one of them is an amazing woman named Karen Strami. She was my boss in the Washington State Auditor's Office for many years. And Karen was also a woman who was one of the few in a leadership role at the time that we were both there. And she was amazing at helping me understand balance and helping me understand confidence and voice. She had a very strong voice. And this was in the audit arena. Sometimes you have to really speak up when you're doing audits. You have to really be kind of forthright with folks. And she was incredible at doing that. And she was incredible at inspiring me on how to learn how to do that and how to have my own voice, not hers, but mine. And in a time when, again, there weren't a lot of females in roles like that. There are more today for sure there than then. And I've always carried that with me. And that I think that's something that sometimes women in particular struggle with, is finding that voice. And she was phenomenal at it. And I give a lot of credit to her in helping me learn how to find mine.
Excellent. So As we speak about your voice and your balance, you
Mhm.
mentioned balance. How do you balance being a mother and a CEO? Both, I understand you have teenagers, and both are very demanding roles. So finding a balance is important, but I also imagine quite a challenge. What has worked well for you in creating balance between your home and work lives?
Yes. So I'm the mom of three teenagers, an 18-year-old, a nearly 17-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And that on its own is quite a thing for anybody who has kids and has teenagers, particularly if you have three of them right together like I do. I think that balance doesn't come naturally. I would love to tell people it does, and maybe for some others it does. It doesn't for me. I have to work pretty hard at balance because it's so important. And I take a concerted amount of time to find balance, to define it, and then to try and operate within it. And in healthcare, there are times where we are going to have to be adaptive and we have to kind of adjust that sort of balance because something has happened. But overall, my kids themselves are a pretty good barometer for me on, hey, mom, you know what? We're doing this, right? We're making sure this happens. And so as a general adaptive policy of mine, which they adjust with me on this, we make sure that we spend time together each evening, dinner. We spend time together on the weekends. As they become teenagers, of course, they have their own lives and they're often sort of splintering off and doing their own things. But I have never lost sight of the fact that, well, I absolutely love Valley and I am very passionate about Valley. I am a mom first. I will always be a mom first. And so, but I have been able to successfully balance that. Also, my husband has been over the years a good helping me with the balancing. But in general, the balance takes work. It takes a lot of work to make sure you don't let yourself get out of alignment too much.
Do you have any specific examples of how you balance? Any particular areas that have been more challenging than others, or maybe when your children were younger, how
Oh.
did you manage?
Yes. So when we had three children that were under the age of 4, because we did that, that there were times where there just wasn't a lot of sleep, really, candidly, just not, and anyone who's got kids will understand that. I think it just truly comes back to being really intentional with recognizing where you're spending your time. And then particularly in healthcare, recognizing on occasion that might have to slide around a little bit because of just what may be happening at the hospital. But in general, I've been very intentional about, you know what, when I'm home for dinner or when the kids were younger and we were doing other types of events, that time is really with them. And if I have to respond to something, I'm going to. But for the most part, that time belongs to them and to me in my role there as mom, as opposed to whatever role I might be experiencing and living here. And overall, that has worked pretty well. As the kids have gotten older, they're just a whole lot better also at calling somebody on something where, mom, hey, it's like, right, that is what we're doing. So they're a very good balancer for me, as well as me having to be concerted in balancing for them.
Mm-hmm. And over the years, have you seen any, you mentioned your mom and this brought this question to mind. Have you seen changes in how women are able to demonstrate their balance, the flexibility in the workplace? So as a parent, as when I was in school, my mom, I played all the sports, but my mom wasn't able to come to any of my events because the flexibility with her job wasn't there. So have you seen that flexibility, any changes in that over the years, and just being able to balance a little bit more or flex a little bit more toward your family versus the demands as a woman, especially in leadership in your workspace?
I would say yes. I mean, I think we've definitely continued to evolve and grow on that over the last 20 years. I would say we definitely organizationally, I think we have continued to really try and help make shifts on that. Me personally, I was always pretty fortunate that with the teams that I've worked with, that we've been able to be pretty adaptive if we've had situations like that. So I think we just continue to get better and better at doing that. I'd like to think we're getting better and better at doing that as a society. I definitely want to also make sure that we're getting better at that as an organization. Me personally, been pretty fortunate along the way that when I really needed to go do something, or I really needed to be somewhere, for the most part, I was able to make those things happen.
Mhm. Great. So, what words of advice or inspiration, you mentioned a bit ago about how you would answer one of the questions now versus how you did answer the question now versus how you would answer it, how you would have answered it 20 years ago. What words of advice or inspiration would you share with your daughters or any woman aspiring to be a leader at Valley in the healthcare field and beyond healthcare?
I think there's a variety of things I would say, and these are things I absolutely would say to my younger self. And it's questionable about whether my younger self would have listened to this one to me. I don't know. I like to think I would. I don't know though. I think being adaptive to whatever opportunities come your way. I think that you have to have some awareness sometimes of these opportunities that are showing up that you may not recognize that that's what they are, but they probably are. So, but you have to be adaptive because your plan probably isn't going to roll out the way you think. You may have constructed a very organized, beautiful, linear plan for whatever you think is happening in your world, and it probably won't play that way. And so being adaptive, I think, is key. I think being very determined and thoughtful, and I think really don't, trust your inner self. Don't just accept when someone tells you, you don't know, you aren't going to be able to do that, or you can't do that. If you're talking about a career aspiration or an attempt at, hey, I want to be a leader one day. And I think that's a really important concept about leaders. Leaders aren't necessarily titles. Leaders are people who other people will choose to follow and listen to because they are passionate about what they do. They're inspirational. And so I think everybody can be leaders, regardless of whether you have some acronym behind your name or not. And that's another core element of don't accept it then if someone says, I don't think you're ever going to be X. I was told you won't be this one day. Not a CEO, but earlier on in my career. And I listened to what they said, but I didn't necessarily believe that. I said, okay, well, I'm going to continue on my path and I'm going to continue with what I'm doing because I actually think I might be able to do that one day. So I think that's core to understanding that you have an intrinsic little voice you should be listening to. And if that little voice wants to steer you in a different direction, maybe you should listen to that and to the opportunities that come your way.
I like that. That's wonderful advice. Wonderful advice. So our last question, as you look forward on your career path at Valley, what would you like your legacy to be? And how would you like to be remembered? How or for what would you like to be remembered?
It's actually just amazing to even contemplate a question like that because I never thought I would be in a role like this. I never thought 20 some years ago when Rich Friedman decided to actually persuade me to come to Valley that I would one day be in this role. I think when I reflect on that, what I hope at the end of whatever that day is, that this organization is stronger, that it is more vibrant, that tapestry that we have continued to weave is stronger, bolder, more diversified, and that we have retained our culture, that we've continued to build on the culture that we have here, that the community is stronger for the role that we play in it, because we play such a huge piece of the community of Southeast King County. And I would like to be, I have a saying in my office, I like because I believe it so strongly, which is, I hope that I'm remembered as someone who made everyone feel like a someone.
I like that. I like that a lot. Well, Jeannine, thank you very much for taking a moment to share yourself with us, your path, your insights, your advice, your favorite motto and credo. And I think that you hoping that you are someone who makes other people feel like someone is very much in alignment with the mission of this hospital, something that I, again, as a physical therapist, face every day, and feeling like our community, treating our community like family. And I want to thank you for that. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.